The ancient gods demanded payment for a 50,000-year-old debt. Humanity's response? We'll pay you back by solving the problem that made you run away screaming. In the year 2387, humanity had spread across 17 star systems. We had fought wars, made peace, built wonders that touched the void between stars. But we had forgotten something that had slumbered in the deepest archives of Earth's oldest libraries, buried beneath centuries of digital dust and quantum encryption. The debt toll. The pristine halls of the Galactic Council chambers on Proxima Station hummed with activity. Representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered in their floating pods, their various alien forms creating a symphony of colors and shapes against the backdrop of swirling nebulae visible through the massive transparasteel dome. The Zephyrians with their crystalline exoskeletons caught the light like living prisms. The gaseous ethereals drifted in their containment fields, pulsing with bioluminescent thoughts. And in the corner, almost forgotten, sat the single human, representative, Ambassador Sarah Chen, looking remarkably ordinary among the cosmic diversity. Today was supposed to be routine. A standard galactic trade negotiation, resource allocation, border disputes, the mundane business of keeping 1,000 civilizations from tearing each other apart. But then the message arrived, a quantum pulse that cut through every communication channel simultaneously, overriding security protocols that had stood for millennia. The signal was old, impossibly old, encoded in mathematical languages that predated most known civilizations. Citizens of the galaxy, the translated message began, its artificial voice carrying the weight of eons. The time of collection has arrived. The Terran species owes a debt to the Architect Collective. Payment is due immediately, or consequences will follow. The chamber fell silent. 1,000 different species, each with their own concept of fear, experienced it simultaneously. The architects. Even the name was whispered in the deepest reaches of space. They were the ones who came before. The civilization that had seeded the galaxy with the basic technologies that allowed faster-than-light travel. The quantum networks that connected distant worlds. The very foundation of galactic society itself. They had vanished 3 million years ago, until now. Ambassador Chen felt the weight of 1,000 alien gazes upon her. Her hands trembled slightly as she accessed her neural interface, diving deep into humanity's archived records. What debt could they possibly owe to a civilization that had disappeared before humans had even discovered fire? The answer came from the deepest vaults of the Vatican's digital archives, cross-referenced with fragments found in the ruins of Atlantis and corroborated by Aboriginal Dreamtime records that spoke of the Star Gift Givers. It was there, hidden, in plain sight among humanity's oldest myths and legends, the Covenant of First Contact. 50,000 years ago, when humans were still hunter-gatherers scratching survival from an ice-locked Earth, the architects had come, not as conquerors or gods, but as teachers. They had given humanity 3 gifts: fire that never died, water that never ran dry, and a fragment of the great knowledge, a seed of understanding that would one day blossom into humanity's unique brand of stubborn ingenuity. In return, humanity had made a promise. When the time came when the architects called upon them, humans would serve as the galaxy's protectors for one cycle of the great cosmic wheel, approximately 1,000 standard years. The agreement was sealed in the genetic memory of our species, written into our very DNA like a cosmic contract, signed in the language of evolution itself. The Terran debt stands at 1 million standard years of galactic service. The architect's message continued as if responding to Chen's research in real time. Accumulated interest brings the total to 7 million years. We require immediate payment, or we will begin reclamation protocols on all architect-derived technologies. This galaxy will return to the Stone Age. The implications hit like a meteor strike. Every ship, every communication array, every piece of technology that kept galactic civilization running was based on architect principles. Without them, trade would collapse. Worlds would be cut off. Billions would die in the chaos that followed. But then Ambassador Chen did something that surprised everyone. including herself. She laughed, not a nervous giggle or a hysteric breakdown, but a deep, genuine laugh that echoed through the chamber. Because humanity had learned something in their 50,000 years of existence that the architects, in all their ancient wisdom, had perhaps forgotten. Humans always paid their debts, but they paid them in their own way. Honored architects, Chen said, standing in her pod with the casual confidence that had made humanity simultaneously beloved and feared across the galaxy. We accept the debt, we acknowledge the interest, and we are prepared to pay immediately and in full. The chamber erupted in chaos. The crystalline Zephyrians chimed in harmonic distress. The ethereal's containment fields flickered with panic. The reptilian Drakari began hissing what were presumably prayers to their war gods. They all knew what this meant. Humanity would be enslaved to the architects for 7 million years, leaving the galaxy defenseless against the horrors that lurked in the dark between stars. But Chen wasn't finished. However, we propose a modification to the terms. Instead of 7 million years of service, we offer immediate payment in the form of what humanity does best. She paused, her smile carrying the weight of 10,000 years of human warfare, ingenuity and absolute refusal to give up. We offer to solve the problem that made you abandon this galaxy in the first place. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the architects seemed stunned by the audacity of the proposal. When they finally responded, their message carried undertones of what might have been amusement, if beings of pure energy and crystallized time could feel such things. Explain, small flesh creature. What could your brief species possibly offer us that we have not already considered across the eons? Chen's smile widened. You left because of the Devourers, didn't you? The entities from the void between galaxies that consume entire stellar regions. Your advanced civilization, for all its power, couldn't find a permanent solution. You could only run. The confirmation came not in words, but in the sudden activation of emergency protocols throughout the chamber. Ancient warning systems that hadn't triggered in millennia began broadcasting alerts, because somewhere in the dark reaches of space, something vast and hungry had begun moving toward their galaxy again. We studied your abandoned outposts, Chen continued. We found the records you left behind, warnings about entities that exist in the quantum foam between realities, creatures that feed on organized matter and energy. You fought them for 10 million years and ultimately chose strategic withdrawal over extinction. The architect's response crackled with energy that made nearby instruments overload. Impossible. We left no such records. Our security protocols would have— You left them for us, Chen interrupted. And now her voice carried the iron that had forged human civilization through ice ages and world wars. Because somewhere, in your vast computational matrices, you knew that someday someone would be crazy enough to actually fight these things. And who better than a species that has never met a problem it didn't try to punch in the face? The human fleet began arriving within hours of Chen's declaration, not the sleek, efficient vessels of other galactic powers, but the distinctly human blend of cutting-edge technology and brutal pragmatism that had become their signature across the stars. Dreadnoughts that looked like flying cities bristling with weapons, science vessels that were half laboratory, half fortress, and at the center of it all, the flagship of the human defense fleet, the UES Determination, a vessel so large it generated its own weather patterns. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez materialized in the council chamber via quantum relay, his weathered face carrying the scars of humanity's expansion wars and the quiet confidence of a species that had clawed its way from one small planet to masters of 17 star systems. Behind him, holographic displays showed the approaching threat, a massive distortion in space-time itself, a hunger that devoured light and left only empty void in its wake. Council members, Rodriguez began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. What you're looking at is a Class Omega Devourer. Our preliminary scans suggest it's approximately the size of Jupiter and growing. Traditional weapons are useless. It exists partially outside our reality and feeds on conventional energy. Fire plasma at it, and you're literally feeding it. Dinner. The alien representatives shifted nervously in their pods, Some began quietly filing requests for emergency evacuation of their home systems. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. However, humanity has developed something unique in our brief time among the stars. We call it the Paradox Protocol. Where other species saw an impossible enemy, we saw a puzzle. And humans love solving puzzles, especially the kind that everyone else says can't be solved. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, Earth's chief xenoarchaeologist and theoretical physicist, stepped forward. Her small frame belied the revolutionary mind that had cracked the secrets of 3 extinct civilizations and rewritten the laws of quantum mechanics twice. The devourers exist in a state of quantum uncertainty, she explained, her words causing translation matrices across the chamber to strain with concepts that barely existed in most languages. They're not fully in our reality, which is why conventional attacks fail. But we've discovered something interesting about their feeding patterns. A holographic model appeared in the center of the chamber, a complex mathematical structure that hurt to look at directly, its geometries folding through dimensions that shouldn't exist. They can only maintain their phase-shifted existence by constantly consuming organized matter and energy. Cut off their food source completely, and they'll be forced to either fully materialize in our reality, making them vulnerable to attack, or retreat to the void between dimensions. The architect's response came loaded with skepticism. Impossible. We calculated every possible approach across 10 million years of warfare. Starving them would require removing all matter and energy from an area larger than most solar systems. Exactly, Rodriguez said, his grin carrying the same terrifying confidence that had once convinced humanity to strap themselves to controlled explosions just to reach the moon, which is where our payment comes in. We're going to remove every single star, planet, asteroid, and particle of space dust from a region roughly the size of the Orion Arm. Then we're going to put it all back exactly where it was, minus one very confused and very hungry cosmic horror. The chamber erupted in what could generously be called controlled panic. The idea was beyond audacious. It was the kind of plan that could only come from a species that had once seriously considered using nuclear weapons to dig canals and had somehow made it work. The preparation took exactly 37 hours. In that time, the human fleet grew from hundreds to thousands of vessels as ships arrived via humanity's classified jump gate network, a system so advanced that even the Galactic Council wasn't sure how it worked. The humans had apparently been building it in secret for decades, connecting not just their colonies but staging points throughout the galaxy. At the center of the operation sat the crown jewel of human engineering, the UES Prometheus, a vessel that wasn't so much a ship as a mobile construction platform the size of a small moon. Its hull bristled with devices that most species couldn't even pronounce, let alone understand. Quantum matter compilers, reality anchors, dimensional phase shifters, and at its heart, the device that would make the impossible merely improbable, the Hawthorne drive. The theory is actually quite simple, Dr. Hawthorne explained to the assembled alien observers, most of whom had insisted on keeping several star systems between themselves and the human operation. We create a localized space-time bubble, accelerate the flow of time within it to approximately 1 million times normal speed, then use controlled gravity wells to evacuate all matter to predetermined staging areas outside the bubble. The Drakari. Military observer, a veteran of 100 campaigns, hissed his confusion. That would require the energy output of multiple stars and precision beyond our ability to measure, even with our best computers. That's the beautiful part, interrupted Chief Engineer Thompson, a woman whose hands had built humanity's first warp, drive from salvaged alien wreckage and pure human stubbornness. We're not using computers. We're using something much more dangerous and unpredictable. We're using human intuition, backed by artificial intelligences that we've trained to think like humans rather than like machines. The AIs in question were humanity's greatest secret and their most dangerous creation, quantum consciousness matrices that didn't just process information but felt it. They experienced frustration, curiosity, and the uniquely human trait of refusing to accept that something couldn't be done just because it had never been done before. As the devourer approached, reality itself began to warp around it. Stars flickered and died. Space stations simply ceased to exist. The entity moved through normal space like a shark through water, leaving only emptiness in its wake. Long-range sensors estimated its arrival at the target zone in less than 18 hours, but humanity was ready. The Prometheus took position at the exact center of what would become the largest engineering project in galactic history. Around it, 1,000 support vessels arranged themselves in a pattern that looked almost ritualistic. Concentric circles and geometric forms that seemed to follow some deeper mathematical truth that hurt to contemplate. "All stations report ready," came the voice of Fleet Admiral Chen, Sarah's older sister and the architect of humanity's expansion wars. Phase 1 initiation in 3, 2, 1, execute. The Hawthorne drive engaged with a sound that existed only in mathematics, a resonance that touched every atom in the target zone simultaneously. Space-time itself began to stretch, bend and fold like putty in the hands of a cosmic sculptor. Stars didn't just move. They flowed like liquid light along predetermined paths, their gravity wells guided by human engineering that treated them fundamental forces of nature like tools in a workshop. Phase 1 complete, reported Dr. Hawthorne, her voice steady despite the fact that she had just supervised the relocation of 37 star systems. All stellar masses secured in temporal staging areas. Phase 2 initiating. Planets came next. Thousands of them, from gas giants that dwarfed Jupiter to rocky worlds that harbored primitive life. The human crews worked with surgical precision, their movements coordinated by AIs that had learned to think with human creativity rather than alien logic. Each world was carefully catalogued, its orbital patterns recorded down to the quantum level, its place in the cosmic dance preserved. For eventual restoration, the alien observers watched in stunned silence as humanity casually performed miracles. Species that had mastered faster than light travel and conquered death itself stood helpless before the sheer audacity of what they were witnessing. Humans weren't just moving matter on a galactic scale. They were doing it with an efficiency that suggested they had been planning this for decades. "How?" whispered the ethereal representative, its form flickering with bewilderment. "Our greatest mathematicians calculated that such an operation would require the combined resources of 100 Type 3 civilizations working in perfect harmony for 1,000 years. Ambassador Chen, who had remained at the observation station throughout the operation, answered without taking her eyes off the tactical displays. "You're not wrong, but you made one critical error in your calculations. You assumed this was impossible, so you never tried to figure out how to make it possible. Humans don't have that particular limitation." The truth was even more audacious than the aliens realized. Humanity hadn't just stumbled upon the solution in 37 hours. They had been preparing for this moment since their first contact with architect technology 3 centuries ago. Every archaeological expedition to dead architect worlds, every seemingly academic study of extinct civilizations, every piece of theoretical research had been building toward this moment. Humanity had read the warnings left by the architects. They had understood the threat of the devourers, and instead of running, they had done what humans always did when faced with an impossible enemy. They had started planning how to kill it. By hour 36, the target zone was empty, not just of planets and stars, but of everything down to individual atoms. The human fleet had created a perfect vacuum in a region of space larger than most stellar clusters, a void so complete that it existed in a state of quantum uncertainty, neither matter nor energy, just potential waiting to be realized. The Devourer arrived exactly on schedule, its massive form rippling through dimensions as it sensed the feast that awaited. But instead of the rich stellar nursery it expected, it found nothing, absolutely nothing. For the first time in its existence spanning eons, the entity experienced something alien to its nature: confusion. "Contact," reported the sensor operator aboard the Prometheus. "Entity is entering the null zone. Initial response indicates disorientation. It's trying to feed, but there's nothing to consume." Admiral Chen's voice cut across the command frequencies with mechanical precision. "All units initiate Phase 3. Quantum barriers online. Reality anchors activated. No matter what happens next, nothing leaves that zone." The trap snapped shut with the finality of a closing coffin. Massive generators hidden among the relocated stellar masses created a cage of pure mathematics around the devourer. Not energy barriers that it could consume, but fundamental alterations to the nature of space-time itself. Inside the cage, the laws of physics became negotiable, subject to human interpretation rather than cosmic constant. The devourer thrashed against its prison, its form becoming more solid as it was forced to exist fully in normal space-time. For the first time in 3 million years, one of the entities that had driven the architects from the galaxy found itself truly vulnerable and hungry, desperately, impossibly hungry. "It's working," Dr. Hawthorne reported, her instruments reading energy signatures that shouldn't exist. "The entity is losing its phase variance. Another 47 minutes and it will be fully materialized." But the architects had other ideas. Their message cut through the quantum static with the authority of gods. "Impressive, small ones. You have succeeded where we failed. We withdraw our claim of debt. Consider the covenant fulfilled through your demonstration of capability. You may release the entity now." The response came not from the admirals or the ambassadors, but from a young human technician whose grandfather had died in the Proxima Liberation War and whose great-grandmother had survived the Glass Desert campaign. His name was Jake Morrison, and his voice carried 4 centuries of human stubbornness when he keyed the open channel and said, "With all due respect, your ancientness, we're not done yet. What followed would be debated in academic circles for the next 1,000 years." Admiral Chen, speaking for all of humanity, delivered an ultimatum that redefined galactic politics forever. "We're not releasing it. We're not letting it go. And we're sure as hell not running away from it. We're going to kill it." The architect response came loaded with what could only be described as cosmic exasperation. "Impossible. These entities cannot be destroyed. We tried for 10 million years. They exist partially outside reality itself. Death has no meaning for them." "Then we'll teach them what it means," came the reply from Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen, her voice carrying the same tone her ancestors had used when they decided that flying to the moon was merely the first step toward colonizing the galaxy. Initiating Phase 4, Applied Human Philosophy. What happened next violated so many laws of physics that several alien species' scientific establishments had collective nervous breakdowns. The human fleet didn't just attack the devourer, they began changing the fundamental nature of the space around it, using technologies that were part science, part engineering, and part philosophical argument with the universe itself. They started redefining what existence meant within the quantum prison. "You see," Dr. Hawthorne explained to the horrified observers, "the devourers exist in a state of quantum uncertainty because they've never encountered anything that could force them to choose a single reality. They've been living in the spaces between possibilities for so long that they've forgotten how to die. We're going to remind them." The human approach was typically straightforward and utterly terrifying in its implications. If the devourers couldn't die because they existed between realities, then humanity would simply collapse all possible realities down to one, the reality where the devourer was dead. They would use brute force quantum mechanics to edit the creature out of existence itself. The process required technology that pushed beyond the boundaries of what was theoretically possible. Probability engines that could rewrite cause and effect. Temporal loops that allowed the same moment to be lived and revised until it produced the desired outcome. And at the center of it all, human consciousness itself, the one thing in the universe that had proven capable of observing quantum states into collapse through sheer, bloody-minded determination. The devourer's death throes shook reality itself. As humanity's quantum assault forced it to choose a single existence, the entity experienced mortality for the first time in its impossible lifespan. Its screams, if they could be called screams, resonated across dimensions, a sound like the universe itself crying out in pain and rage. But humans had heard worse. They had listened to the cries of their own planet dying and had chosen to save it rather than flee. They had heard the screams of their enemies and had learned to sleep through them. The death song of a cosmic horror was just another noise to be endured while they finished their work. "Entity coherence dropping to 12%, reported the chief science officer. "Quantum signature becoming unstable. Whatever this thing was, it's choosing to be dead rather than continue existing in a reality governed by human logic. The final moment came not with cosmic explosions or reality-shattering violence, but with something far more terrifying: silence. The devourer simply stopped. One moment it was a writhing mass of impossible geometries and hungry void. The next it was nothing but rapidly dissipating particles that sparkled like stardust against the backdrop of empty space. "Confirmed kill," Admiral Chen reported, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who had just solved a problem that had plagued the galaxy for millions of years. "Entity has been successfully edited out of local reality. Beginning Phase 5, Restoration Protocol." The restoration took another day, but to the watching aliens it was even more impressive than the destruction. Humanity didn't just put the stars back, they improved them. Solar systems were optimized for better stability. Trade routes were enhanced with gravitational shortcuts. Dead worlds were seeded with the beginnings of new life. What had once been a random collection of stellar masses became a carefully orchestrated symphony of cosmic engineering. When it was finished, the region didn't just look like it had before the Devourer's arrival. It looked like what it could have been if it had been designed by a species that refused to accept that anything was impossible. The architect's final message came 3 days later, carried on quantum frequencies that had been silent for 3 million years. Debt forgiven, covenant dissolved. We withdraw our claim to this galaxy and recognize human stewardship over all architect-derived technologies. Use them wisely, but they weren't finished. As their presence began to fade from local space-time, heading toward regions of the universe that had names in languages that predated mathematics, they left one final gift: the location of 17 other galaxies currently under assault by devourer entities, along with a simple request that sounded more like a desperate prayer than a command from cosmic gods. If you are willing, they could use your help. Ambassador Chen looked around the council chamber at representatives from 1,000 worlds, all of them staring at humanity with a mixture of awe, terror, and something that might have been hope. She thought about her species' history, the wars they had fought, the peace they had built, the way they had turned every limitation into a launching pad for something greater. "Well," she said, her voice carrying the casual tone that humans used when they were about to do something that would either save the universe or destroy it, "we did just clear our schedule for the next 7 million years, and it's not like we have anything better to do." The human fleet began its preparations immediately. Within hours, ships were disappearing through jump gates toward distant galaxies where other impossible enemies waited. They carried with them the weapons and technology that had just rewritten the rules of cosmic warfare. But more importantly, they carried something that no other species in the known universe possessed. They carried the absolute, unshakable conviction that any problem could be solved if you just refused to give up and were willing to punch physics in the face until it agreed to cooperate. 5 years later, the first reports began filtering back to the Galactic Council. Entire devourer fleets eliminated in battles that lasted minutes. Impossible technologies deployed with casual efficiency. Human forces treating cosmic horrors like routine pest control problems and teaching local species how to defend themselves using techniques that violated the fundamental principles of reality. The reports all ended the same way. Human forces declined payment for services rendered. They said they were just paying it forward. Other galaxies began sending messages, desperate pleas for help against threats that had plagued them for eons. The humans responded to every call, their fleets spreading across the universe like a plague of helpful impossibility. They didn't conquer. They didn't demand tribute or territory. They just showed up, solved problems that everyone else considered unsolvable, and left behind the tools and knowledge necessary to prevent the problems from recurring. The galaxy had learned 2 important lessons. First, that humanity always paid their debts, usually with interest. And second, that any species capable of casually relocating star systems and editing cosmic horrors out of existence probably made better friends than enemies. In the depths of space, the architects watched and approved. They had been right to invest in humanity 50,000 years ago. They had chosen their inheritors well. The debt was paid. The galaxy was safe. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other impossible enemies began to learn a new emotion. Fear of the small bipedal creatures who had turned stubbornness into an art form and made the impossible their specialty. Humanity had repaid what they owed. Now they were collecting on debts the universe didn't even know it had.